Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our sixth session of educational AMAs. So our educational AMAs at Oosh Tech Lab are for early stage entrepreneurs to help them on their journey. Today, we have Kiko, or KZ, who is the head of growth at Orca. And Orca is one of the leading DeFi protocols on Solana with a focus on capital efficiency and human-centered design. So Kiko will be covering three core topics related to Web3 growth that are outside of product development: the business itself, team, and your community. Some topics that we'll cover include the fundamentals of writing and executing a Web3 business plan, how to plan, hire, and incentivize your Web3 team, and tips on building and nurturing a community on Discord. So Kiko and I actually go way back. We're university buddies. So really excited to have her here with us today. When Kiko first joined Orca, I believe you guys were a 4-person team, and now you're about 30 people strong. Am I right?
Yeah, it's so funny. We've known each other for over a decade. This is our first conversation about work.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So official. Yeah. So when I first joined Orca, I was actually still working full time at IDEO, my previous employer. And at the time, I was the fourth person to join. The first two were the co-founders, Ori and Yutaro. If you Google Orca or Orca.so, you'll see kind of a lot of their interviews and them appearing alongside Solana, which is the blockchain we're building on, for some of the recent press releases. For example, Solana announcing the first ever blockchain phone in collaboration with Samsung. So they were on stage for the press release for that. So they were the first two people. And then we had T-Mock, who is our first dev, in addition to the two co-founders. And I was the fourth person, first business hire, if you will, to help them on kind of starting with the back office operation infrastructure end of things, and now kind of moving into middle of office, looking at brand, marketing, community, and a bunch of other things.
Exciting, really good stuff. So we have a lot to learn from you today based on your experience. I'll cover some questions that I think would be interesting for the audience to hear. But please, anyone, if you have any specific questions or anything that you want to ask Kiko, she's more than happy to share. She's got a lot of experience helping to grow this Web3 team. Okay, so let's start with the business side of things. First question for you. How much preparation work is required to launch a Web3 project or company?
I think it depends on how you got started. So I can only speak from my experience of helping build Orca. So Orca started with a very clear product plan. So actually the product was already live for a few months when I joined, but there wasn't like a product spec, if you will, that was very fully outlined. So some people might be surprised to learn that Orca doesn't even have a white paper. So a lot of people who are coming on to Web3, they think there are a few requirements, right? They hear about tokenomics, white paper, and all of that. The truth is you don't actually need either when you get started. Although if you have to pick one from tokenomics and white paper, I would pick tokenomics. So white paper is usually the piece of document that showcases how differentiated a piece of technology is. So if your product has a cutting edge piece of technology, very innovative, never seen before, a white paper can kind of help you illustrate why that technology is different and how that can bring value to its users. In the case of Orca built a AMM DEX, which is a product that's very similar to Uniswap. If you are a kind of a degen on Ethereum. So pretty much it is a product that has existed in other blockchains before. It is a product that is quite easy to understand for those who are first coming into crypto. It's kind of like a P2P bank where you are, instead of withdrawing your money from a bank of America, a bank of Hong Kong or whatever, you are kind of taking that currency exchange between different tokens from a pair that's provided by another wallet. And behind that wallet, it could be an individual, it could be a set of individual, you just don't know. But you
Mhm.
are directly getting from them and you're paying your transaction fees to them for them to earn a reward for providing that liquidity. So
Got it.
that product itself existed, so we didn't have to really prepare to explain our product to the audience that much. But what we did need is something that differentiates our product from other products alike. So in our case, the preparation is actually writing the code, kind of moving that set of code from a different from where it existed before on ETH to the coding language of Solana, and then also to design out a very user friendly and very intuitive front end. So a lot of people say there's a very high barrier of entry for crypto and for
Yep.
trading.
Yep.
So having an intuitive user experience is how we made that a barrier a bit lower, actually quite a lot lower for our users. So
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
that's very interesting. And in terms of how you approach just design, just maybe to touch quickly, if you have some thoughts on that, how have you managed to build Orca from kind of more of a user-centered, user-friendly approach than perhaps some of the other AMM DeFis out there?
Yeah, so I should clarify that I am the fourth team member. I'm not the founder, but I
Yep.
will say that both the co-founder who's in charge of design and front-end design and myself came from a design innovation consultancy called IDEO that kind of spearheaded this concept of human-centered design and like kind of focusing on research as a really strong prerequisite of designing anything out. So a lot of people love crypto for the anon perspective of it, right? You don't have to really show your face. In fact, this is the first time I've shown my face in public in a really long time. I feel a little bit strange about it. Um, so, so I think people value the kind of like being able to connect with each other, but in the comfort of kind of a persona or identity you create. And people value the trustlessness of it. But in
Right.
reality, however trustless crypto is, behind every screen is a person. So before we design out the front end, Grace, our co-founder, actually spent a long time doing deep dive qualitative research with users to better understand what are the pain points that they experience when they're trying to trade on a blockchain. What are some of the existing products that they use a lot, but actually they wish there were some things that they could have in its components that could have been improved. So when Orca first rolled out, there were a few things that are very innovative. First is there is this little green button called Fair Price Indicator. So as you guys may or may not know, crypto prices are really volatile, especially in the last few months, right? It kind of just goes up and down, and it could bring a lot of emotional turbulence, especially when you trade. Sometimes in a split second, the price could just drop or it could change. So the fair price indicator actually tells you that if you trade in the next 15 seconds, this price that you're trading with is within a very small slippage rate compared to CoinGecko, which is a public pricing index for crypto that's out there. So having this very small green button, it brings a lot of confidence for trading for the user. And however small that is actually, it does put people at ease when they're using Orca.
Yeah, I think it's very important to consider that users are always at the forefront of, when you're designing a product to make sure that it works for them, and even these small tweaks can really make a difference.
Yeah,
On that note, maybe I'm jumping around a little bit. Just
that's
curious
okay.
if it's got anything to do with nurturing a community on Discord. Can that help? Can you sort of
Yeah.
leverage that? And are there tips you have in terms of how do you engage a community proactively on Discord, considering all the trolls and all that stuff involved? Is there a way to really engage a community appropriately for product design and growth?
Yeah, so I think the one of the main difference that as I see it in Web3 compared to Web2 is that the community is actually an extension of your product. It's a very important part of your product. But where we get started with maintaining community is actually from a very core Web2 or a very core traditional business concept, is how to design out your brand. So very early on, we have a very clear set of brand voice guideline. What does Orca stand for, and what is Orca's tone of voice? And this is very clear in our blog post communication. We actually extend that same tone of voice in our Twitter. We have actually designed visuals to match that tone of voice, which is like a playful but also a professional tone. And also, actually, there's another component, is that Orca has a very purpose-driven mission, where every one BIP of the trading fee actually goes towards a climate fund to help climate kind of global warming or any other climate-related initiatives. And we actually donate that money to charity, and we're very open about it. So we kind of try to communicate those core components, the professionalism, the playfulness, and also the purpose-driven in every piece of our kind of external-facing communication. And community is actually very, very open, very external-facing, and much more volatile than a Twitter or maybe like a poster. Because in Discord and maybe in Telegram, you can interact with that brand and you can like immediately see how that brand is responding to you, right? So in Discord, I think having the brand voice, having that strong brand identity is key. And the next step is like, with that brand, what does that mean for how you want your brand to interact with the community? And how do you translate that into a set of training guidelines for your community managers? So there are a lot of mods, right? Mods who moderates the channels. But for Orca specifically, like if we are going to be that friendly helping hand, we're not just moderating the community, we're also answering questions. We're actually answering questions in a certain way that makes users and the community members feel our brand, right, as we interact with them. We carry that professionalism. We kind of try to use a lot of marine puns as we communicate, because it has this like ocean and like fun-loving like element to it. And actually all of that, how we communicate, how we deal with different kind of scenarios of trolls in Discord are all documented in our community onboarding guide. And there's actually a monthly training where we update the community team on where the product is going, and if there are any changes in our brand language, our communication, our direction, we try to give examples and we try to make sure our community team understands. And in turn, we actually select our community team very carefully. And in turn, we actually compensate them quite a bit better than your average mod out there. But that's all in the interest of maintaining that brand through and through to the last what do you call it? The last step, I guess, of our product.
That's very fascinating to really think about all of your interactions. Every company has a brand, and it is important to think about how your brand's being portrayed. But as you had mentioned, because it's a lot closer with the access of Discord and Telegram, right, that it's even more integral to really think about and monitor and manage those things.
Yeah,
that's really fascinating.
Maybe I will give a quick example to
that would be great.
Make it a bit more relatable. So going back to the price difference. So there are a lot of price volatility in crypto, and there are also a lot of projects that rug, right? People that want to make a quick buck, they build this product, they make sure it looks fancy, they do an IDO, they launch a token. And after a while, it seems like this token is just like going downhill and you really don't know what the team is doing. So when that happens, Orca as a platform for you to trade these tokens, and as a leading protocol, right, and kind of a protocol that sets an example for other protocols, our community actually becomes quite noisy when another project runs. So there was this one example of a particular project that actually ended up releasing a lot more tokens than they initially said they will, and that actually crashed the price. And there was a lot of like crypto Twitter happening, kind of driving the community into thinking that the founders of this protocol is going to like dump this project and make money for themselves. So when this happened, this is a token that was listed on Orca, because Orca, as a decentralized platform, we actually strive to list every token available, right? We're not doing any, we're not choosing. We're not like a bank, and we're not a stock exchange where we vet projects in that way, because it's meant to be decentralized and you're meant to do your own research. But the community, whether they've done their research or not, they're not happy about the price, right? So there's actually community members who come into our Discord and demand Orca to delist this project and say, you cannot. If you're setting an example for Solana, or if you're setting an example for the community, if you're really professional, as you say, you should, give the community what they want and delist this token, so no more community members are trading this token and losing money because of it. So the natural response, I think, for some community managers or for some protocols is to give the community what they want, right? To be like, okay, you are really making a really good point. There's a lot of people supporting you. Seemingly, let us just delist it. But for Orca, the purpose-driven part is key. We are decentralized, so we cannot just randomly delist because a set of community members says so, because that doesn't respect the ethos of decentralization and making this available for everyone. Because what if the people who are not speaking are interested in using this token for whatever else, right? But our responses need to be quite measured, because these are very angry and very heated situations. And they actually went on to create multiple Twitter accounts and multiple Discord accounts to kind of bombard different channels in the Orca Discord with this demand. So there were several emergency meetings, because a lot of our community managers were quite angry because they're getting personally attacked by these people.
Of course.
So there were quite a few mornings where I would like jolt awake at 6 a.m. and looking at kind of the community, people just like angering each other, and us jumping on like 20-minute calls talking about what to do, how to react. Because just because they're angry doesn't mean we attack back, doesn't mean we take a certain action immediately, but it also doesn't mean we ban them straight away. Because these are community members who have been with Orca for a long time. And the reason that they're angry is because they've come to trust the brand. Or if they don't care about Orca, if they don't care about what Orca stands for, they really don't have much to be angry about either.
Yeah.
So we actually end up taking the measure of, we had a 3-strike policy of personal attacks. Every time when they give a personal attack, we will remind them quite nicely and then tell them about the Discord rules. And then there were quite a few direct messages going on, trying to understand where this anger was coming from and why it was directed at Orca. So actually, after maybe 1 to 2 months, this died down. But the way we handled it, that aligned with the brand principles of Orca, did send a message to the community. This is how Orca will handle things going forward. So when future there were projects that would rug things that are beyond Orca's control, we no longer saw this type of behavior happening on our Discord.
Oh, wow. I mean, it sounds as if not only is it really good to have a strong brand externally, but the only way to enforce it is to make sure that everyone on the team really understands what, your business stands for, what your project originally, the reason for being, and is able to sort of make decisions and execute on that. So it sounds like a very strong team, a very strong brand building. I mean, you come from IDEO. There's a lot of experience there on your end, and for the founder at Orca as well. So it's quite enlightening to hear as well that it still plays a huge importance in
and
success.
The more decentralized the team is, the more difficult it would be to maintain that brand voice. So as Orca becomes more and more decentralized, one of the things that I'm working on is to create a lot more like stronger documentation on how we communicate our brand and how different teams will function. So when our team becomes not a team of 30 people across 5 time zones, but maybe 6 to 10 working groups of 100 people across even more time zones, at least they will have a piece of documentation that they can reference when another volatile or another heated discussion happens in Discord.
Definitely. Actually, that comes onto a question that I think you and I had a discussion about just previously.
Yeah.
After building a project and having, set intentions on migrating it to some type of DAO or community-driven project and ecosystem, what are some considerations that need to be made on that end, given the fact that, you do have people who are passionate, who are interested, who do care about the project, but how do you kind of manage that transition, make sure that the people who are making these core decisions are, really have the brand at heart, and really are able to execute appropriately on, when crises are to arise, or even just goal setting for the project itself?
Yeah. So we're in midst of it right now. So I don't know if I have like best practices to share because we're
Yeah.
kind of trying it for the first time. And
Yeah.
to be honest, even though there are a lot of examples of decentralization or a lot of examples of DAO governance on Ethereum or a few other blockchains, there's even more examples of DAOs gone wrong or decentralization gone wrong, where as the product or as the protocol decentralizes, it doesn't go forward, right? The users don't grow, the project doesn't grow. It seems like no one's maintaining it, and there's a very slow turnaround for any decision because there is this decentralized way of decision making. So there's a lot of learning from that. I would say like one key learning that we drew as one of our co-founders. So I mentioned one of the co-founder was my ex-coworker at IDEO, and she is the design mastermind. The other co-founder is a veteran developer who used to build for Ethereum and for projects on Ethereum. So having been in the industry for the space for a really long time, I think one of the things we decided is that we will decentralize, and decentralization is actually the goal right from the start, that we would decentralize fully in 3 years, and now we're on year 2. And that we will decentralize not immediately to a full democracy, but in a gradual manner. So if anyone who is listening, who's thinking about kind of designing your own crypto protocol and designing your own tokenomics, for example, one thing to keep in mind in your tokenomics is not just how users or how token holders can extract value from your design of the product of the tokenomics, but also like when will they be able to extract that value? And ideally, it is along the same timeline as the decentralization progression that you're thinking about. So I will say decentralization is something that you should always keep in mind right from the start. And this is important because of how much it stays true to the ethos of crypto, of joint ownership, of consensus driven, but also because of safety reasons, actually. As you, Ro, you may know, or the listeners may know, there are a lot of eyes from regulators on crypto. Recently, there is the Tornado Cash news, right? And I mean, there are a lot of news every month happening in crypto. There was the Three Arrows news, there was the Terra news, right? I would be surprised if these news didn't draw regulators in. But one of the ways to make sure the team and the treasury that the team's product is creating stays safe is through decentralization, is through showing that decentralization makes sure that this protocol does not meet the Howey test. So if you're interested, look up Howey test, Howey. test. And if you're interested in thinking about how to decentralize but doing it gradually, one of the thought leaders in this space, his name is Mark Boyron. So he just became chief legal officer for Polygon, and previously he was chief legal officer for a protocol that has some similarities to Orca. So decentralization, very, very important, and you want to think about doing it slowly, and you want to think about designing it. Don't take a playbook from another protocol and just applying it to you, because the nature of every protocol is different. Maybe for Orca, the community team is very well-trained, very regulated. They have a set of things that they know what to do. They're self-directed, so they're easily transitioned into the DAO. They could be the first team to transition. But maybe for some other protocol, their community team is like 5 mods who have never met each other. They get paid $10 a week. Then once you transition them and there's no one managing them or maintaining them, it could just fall apart. But I think thinking about the different functions of any business and thinking about how to make sure that this function of the business can run as autonomously as possible is always the right way to think about it. And another piece of consideration is, how much does it cost to run this function autonomously, and where does that money come from? And that goes into actually your tokenomics design, right? So your protocol is generating money. Where does that money go? Does that money go to the continuous maintenance and sustainability of this protocol? Or does this money go towards the token holders? And there is a tension there, because if you give more money to token holders, or if you reward token holders too soon and too much, there is not a lot left for you to maintain the protocol at its healthy operating state, which actually means in the long run, the token holders get less. Things to consider.
Yeah, there's I think you had a few nuggets in there. You mentioned someone, did you say Michael Burton? Did I get that name correctly?
His name is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Actually, his name is Mark Boyron.
Mark Boyron.
M-A-R-C.
M-A-R-C?
Boyron, B-O-I-R-O-N.
B-O-I-R-O-N.
Yeah,
for
so if you look
decentralization.
for him on Twitter, he recently published this, I think it's called like Web3 Builders Playbook for Decentralization. I might be paraphrasing. So like that's a good piece of reading if you wanted to consider decentralization.
Okay.
It's actually something that we're reading internally for our weekly kickoff. We've started this decentralization reading corner to get everyone on board to the idea of decentralizing and what is needed to be done. And his documentation is the first choice of our reading material.
Wonderful. I just wrote it in the chat for anyone who's interested. So for easy reference for those of you that are thinking about decentralization, but need to think about it in a conscientious and proactive manner to ensure the longevity of your project moving forward. You had a lot of nuggets in there, Kiko, as always.
Which ones do you want to unpack?
Yeah, I'm just thinking right now. I know that, we had discussed previously, it's, you wouldn't claim yourself to be a tokenomics expert. You had quickly mentioned it. Just wondering if you want to share some quick thoughts on, say a team is putting together their considerations around their tokenomics. Do you have some thoughts on that? Anything to kind of shed light, or where people should begin, how they should approach it?
So if you are a protocol who is that is building and is planning on racing, your tokenomics is the first thing that a VC is going to want to look at, because it tells you a few things, right? It tells you, how does the team think about longevity? So like there are a lot of ways to tell if a tokenomics is designed to be a quick grab and go, a quick rug. Maybe they are putting a lot of money into giving a lot of money into the core team members. Maybe they're implementing this really, really aggressive buyback and burn to kind of raise the value of the token. So if that is coupled with a lot of token given to the team members and unlocked very quickly, then you kind of have your answer. So pretty much, if you're looking to raise, if you're looking to seriously build a protocol for the long term, how the tokenomics is designed with kind of future accrued value in mind is very important. I cannot go into how your tokenomics should be designed, because depending on the nature of your product and your team and how you want to present yourself to the community is all very different. But there are a few core components that are pretty general and applicable. So you want to think about how much of your token, well, first of all, you want to think about the amount, right? The total amount of token that you want to mint. For example, as you all know, one of the magic of Bitcoin is that it is deflationary, right? Because there is a finite amount and it just gets harder and harder to accumulate more Bitcoin. And that is the finite amount of tokens is usually true for most protocols that start to have an initial token event or initial mint event. The rug project that I mentioned previously that caused a stir in Orca's Discord, the stir, which was actually caused because they manipulated the total mint amount. So what was communicated as the finite total amount of tokens they would mint was actually more than quadrupled like a few months later. So they created more tokens for themselves. So never do that. So decide on a finite amount so you're answering to your community, you're staying true to your community. And then when you think about that pie of all of the tokens you have, how much of it goes to the community eventually? How much of it goes to the core team? The initial team, I should say, because as you decentralize, it's no longer the core team. It could be an operating team. It could not be that team at all. How much of that is reserved for possible private sale, and how much of that is reserved for bringing in outside help in different ways? So some people would put a really large portion for community and then later on start to submit proposals for the community to vote on to extract portions from that piece of the pie to use for value add. That's one way to do it. It could be a slower way because you have to go through proposal, but it could be a more democratized way to do it.
Democratic, yeah.
But some people kind of design out, they have a slice right from the start and say this piece is reserved for fundraising, or this piece is reserved for bringing in different advisors with different expertise. And it is not uncommon for your tokenomics to be redesigned and to be reshared throughout your 2 years or 3 years or however many long years before you fully decentralize. So I would say my one biggest piece of advice is that crypto and crypto Twitter as a whole, it hates and it loves all very, very quickly. So if you design your tokenomics initially and you feel like after a few months you designed it wrong, it's okay to change it as long as you communicate to your shareholders, your token holders, or your community very sufficiently why you're making that change. And it's also okay for there to be differing voices, because at the end of the day, people are more vicious behind a screen if they don't have to be revealing their true identity. So it's also okay to not listen to every single voice. Or it's okay to hear them, but you don't have to listen to every single one of them.
Got it. I think that is important. I think there's a lot to say about trolls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Engaging community. I think I overheard one when I listened in on one of your calls recently. Your public Discord call. Yeah. So it is an interesting thing to consider. One little nugget you mentioned previously as well is just how strong actually your team is. And I think it's so fascinating. Also just to share a little bit about your background here. I know that, Kiko's worked in great Web 2 companies, so to speak, or I guess traditional
Or
companies.
like webless companies, I guess.
Webless Mattel,
Some of
right?
the companies, have no web. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've been at, really great companies, Mattel, Deloitte, IDEO. So, transitioning into Web3, I think there's a lot that people would love to learn in terms of how you made that transition, how you also approach hiring people. What would you consider? Do they need to have a lot of experience in Web3? What does that even mean? What does that look like? Given the fact that it is a nascent industry, it's still growing. There's a lot of dynamics at play here. Maybe you can shed some light on starting with yourself and then your hiring approach.
Yeah. So I think some of my comments, I will try not to generalize and pass judgments as I go on. So I'll mostly focus on kind of my own, I guess, path and kind of some of the decisions we made as we kind of grew. So as Ro mentioned before, I've worked in quite a few different industries, doing different things. But I've always been a generalist, and I would say like maybe the strongest skill that I have is maybe like detection, like pattern gap detection and communication. And they kind of work together in kind of team building, looking for what Orca's missing right now and kind of looking for how a person or a process or a set of both can help fill that gap. I mostly joined Orca because I wanted to help Utaro and Ori. I believed in the two of them. I knew one of them to begin with, but I met both of them together. I felt like there is a very good combination of kind of crypto and product sensibility and ethicality, which is very, very important for me going into any company. So it's probably my primary driver for deciding where to go is this team willing to maybe sacrifice money or efficiency or something else for doing something in the right way, and Orca is one of those protocols, one of those teams. So that's why I decided to join. So actually that is a guiding principle when we hire, before we think about, or maybe at the same time as thinking about skill fit, which in reality is really hard to say in Web3, because we could hire someone, for example, when Orca first started, we had a very design-led approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could have hired someone that is more interested in design, in research, in maybe brand building, right? People who are more qualitative. But or people who are more strategically minded and are better at maybe people from traditional consulting backgrounds, for example. But as we progress, Orca is actually repositioning itself into more of a builder's toolkit, a infrastructure layer that is builder facing and maybe liquidity provider facing. So we actually need people who are more in tune to ecosystem, who understands maybe traditional finance, or more than anything understands relationship building in different capacities, online, offline, right? To get more builders to build on us, to get more LPs to LP for Orca, to liquidity provide for Orca. But that change of our positioning happened very, very quickly, as a result of where Orca thinks it should go, where it should play, but also where the market was going. And it is very, very probable that you hire someone for one set of skill set and task, and 2 months just after they finish onboarding and getting to know everyone, like the brief has changed.
Yeah.
So we hire for, of course, core competency. For example, if you're a dev, you have to develop, right? That you have to, maybe you don't have to know Rust, which is the coding language, but you have to be a very skilled developer that can be very quick at learning Rust. Maybe if you're hired as I want to say a big BD, a business developer. You don't have to know the ecosystem really well from the very start, but you love crypto and you was you were able to understand another ecosystem very quickly, and you can translate that knowledge into into understanding Solana, into understanding our ecosystem. So I think we actually first and foremost look for core set of competency in their hard skill that they're being hired for, but also in their learning skills, because the industry changes so quickly. You just have to learn so fast.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we look for a culture fit, which primarily lies in, I think, their ability to pivot quickly, their ability to take constructive feedback and change quickly, and their purpose and their ethics. So those are very, very important to us. And we've recently actually made a hire. We've made several hires from the community directly. So almost all of our community team members were just helpful community members from the start, trying to help each other out, trying to answer questions, and showing that they have a deep understanding of the space and maybe of Orca and what Orca stands for. So we ended up kind of compensating them for kind of showing those strengths. And we recently actually made another hire from the community who came from more of like a semiconductor industry, but is now a business developer for Orca. So like their past experience, to be honest, isn't always that relevant, but their passion for understanding the space, their ability to learn, and their culture fit are very important for Orca, especially as you decentralize. It is very important for people to share a similar drive and passion as we kind of disperse and each lead our own functions and in an async manner. If you don't even trust each other, that they have the best intentions and the aligned interests at heart, it's very, very difficult to organize a team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it comes down to, again, really understanding your core values, understanding why you exist. I mean, I know you mentioned that you didn't really have a white paper. You might have said you
Right.
had a business plan. Do you have a document somewhere? A pitch deck, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
do you guys have a document somewhere that sort of works as your, I don't know, 10 commandments, holy grail, if you will, of really understanding what is Orca about, what you stand for, maybe some of these core values as well, or styles of communication, is just sort of a hero document that everyone can refer to, if they feel as if, hey, we're a growing organization. I'm in charge of a function now. I have a really big decision to make, but I just need a reference point somewhere to know, how do I strategically think about solving this problem? Is there something that they can go to?
Currently, no.
How do you guys approach
I
that?
think, because there was a lot of nuance in the question in the statement you just made,
Yeah.
because you're looking for a hero document not just to understand Orca's brand, but also to guide decision making.
Yes.
But the truth is, it really depends on the size of the decision.
Yeah.
Hopefully, at the team size that Orca is at now, for any bigger decisions, we are talking to each other before we make it.
Right.
Not just referring to a document, but actually, good question, because even as we are decentralizing, hopefully every major decision is a discussion. So Orca is moving into a governance model that is council led. So it's going to be a council of 6 to 7 people who have, expertise from crypto or from, other industry areas that we think can help Orca. But actually, the proposal is going to be made by like an entity or a team separate from Orca that's specifically been appointed by Orca to think about governance and to make these proposals and choose these people. So the idea is that there is a set of guidance given by this organization to the council, but the council, through their own discussions, they also have the liberty, and they're encouraged to maybe construct on top of the guidance that they receive. So it is very possible that there could be a hero document that comes out. In fact, as we go through this repositioning that I just talked about, We are in the process of doing rebranding documents, having a more a consolidated version of what Orca stands for, Orca's brand voice guide, and maybe what this means for Orca's product roadmap going forward. We don't have that yet, but if you go on Orca's Discord, you can tell what Orca's community vibe that it wants to maintain by the rule set that we have. For example, like do not discriminate. Here are some ways for you to contribute to the community. So we have those outlined. And if you go on Orca's About page, it does have visually and also tonally in its text talk about how Orca sees itself and who Orca's target users or target community members are. Internally, we have another set of voice guide, and we have actually OKRs that we just started to implement every quarter that talks about key objectives, and that is communicated. But these are a few pieces of documents, not just one.
Yeah, I think I was just so fascinated by the fact that it sounds as if all these decisions are coming from sort of like a core ethos and a core way of seeing the future of Orca's involvement in DeFi. And I just think it's fascinating then that what I'm learning, what I'm understanding is that it all really lies in like each team member really embodying that ethos and having your community team discussions around each point and collaborating together. And then as you move forward, then it's about formalizing that document as you get more decentralized. But at the moment, it sounds as if it's a lot of communication and it's a lot of internal discussions around decisions that need to be made to make sure that the decisions you make are really reflective of where everyone wants the protocol to grow.
Yeah, and I want to say that maybe the communications won't really stop even if the document is published, because as we decentralize more, there's actually going to be more voices. And the people who are in the team right now, the people who came from the community and represent the community for the team, internally with the team and also outwardly for the team, hopefully they become the champions that holds that voice in future growing numbers of discussions out there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's was
sorry,
really
we kind of like didn't exactly go with our question list.
I know. I'm actually seeing now. I know we've got 8 minutes to spare, and please, anyone, if you're listening, if you have any specific questions, please type them in the chat, and we'll get to them. I'm just quickly looking at our question list here to see if there's something that I think would be really great to hear from Kiko. Let's see. How about incentivization? Maybe we can talk about employee incentives and, as you go about hiring, you mentioned how you hire and the things that you look for. How do you go about sort of compensating or rewarding your team? Do you think about equity? Do you think about tokens? Do you even think about fiat?
Yeah. So I think something that I failed to mention earlier is that well, I did mention a little bit that the legal landscape is like pretty difficult to tread. So one of the recent hires that we made this year is to hire a general counsel for Orca, so we can decentralize very safely and we can decentralize kind of with as much knowledge as we have about the legal landscape. And that was a very interesting hiring process. So like I found the person through a connection of one of our investors. And as we started talking, this person was in the process of leading their current company through their IPO. So like obviously very qualified, was managing like a 20-pax legal team, and had very, very generous incentives for coming from a company that just went through IPO and was obviously had every intention to keep this person around. So how do we persuade a person that could be making millions somewhere else to come to a startup and not make those millions, or at least like in the short run, it seems like they're making much less. So I feel like, and this might not sound this might sound like I am just playing a sales tactic, but it is very true that those who have a purpose in life and those who want to, I hate the word making an impact because it's so oversaid, but like those who I think want to stay true to something beyond generating money only, they're also willing to kind of look at the long-term kind of impact that a decision has on their life, and maybe also most definitely also on their wealth. But the wealth comes in, I think, a few different folds. So being in a crypto protocol, and also being in a decentralizing crypto protocol, actually the incentive lies in a few different stages. So when a person first comes in, you're paying them a mix of a USDC. So we pay in USDC, not fiat, because we're mostly almost all on chain, right? So a mix of their USDC, which is their stable income, and also a portion of Orca's tokens. In our tokenomics, this is reserved for the team. But also, as we decentralize, this person has the opportunity to be more involved in governance, right? So their involvement in governance might mean they have a different set of income. So like they might become a council member that actually has like an equivalent of like a normal full-time salary for some people in the US or in other countries. In other countries, maybe like 5 people's full-time salary. Like we try to incentive align the council members so they stay on and help Orca make decisions as we decentralize. So a person from the team could move over to be a council member, or they could move over to be a future working group member that works under the DAO instead of the current initial team. Or with the token that this person is accumulating through working for Orca, or like to a small degree through maybe like trading or understanding the industry, if you will, they can use those tokens to vote, to potentially change their incentive structure in the future for token holders, not just them, but also like, overall token holders of Orca.
Right.
And they, through their relationships that they're building in this industry, through helping Orca succeed, through helping Orca kind of materialize on the composability, more liquidity could flow in, which could mean more incentives for token holders of Orca. Or in that process, they could identify other protocols to be involved in and to hold tokens in, and there could be more incentives for them. So it's actually actually, there are a lot of benefits to being a part of a growing, ethically decentralizing protocol. And it's not just their initial pay. It wasn't, I'm not saying it was like a very easy conversation with this individual, but they did end up taking a sizable pay cut willingly to join our team. And this person joining has helped our team's effort to decentralize tremendously.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think something interesting that you touched on there is just ethics as well. And we have a question that's come in from the audience from WH Lai. The base layer blockchain Orca chose, Solana, itself is very centralized. Pre-mined tokens, majority controlled by venture capital. How do you manage the conflicts with Orca's ethos of decentralization?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commentary out there about how centralized certain blockchains are. And certainly, like as you look at what ETH is doing, of course, it is more centralized compared to ETH. But I will say this is not a this is a personal statement. I do not represent Orca as I say this, but like, where do you draw the line? Do you want a efficiently run team? Do you want an efficiently run product, or do you want especially decentralized but inefficiently run product that like can never make a decision? I think in the beginning stages of a team, any team, crypto or otherwise, decisions need to be made quickly, and pivots need to be made quickly. And having a team that are relatively together and share a understanding is very, very pivotal for that. I will say though, like if you do look at Solana's like changes, they are actively trying to kind of decentralize in their own way. They are moving to Solana Labs, Solana Foundation. They are trying to make sure that they're also following the ethos of decentralization. How do I manage the conflict? I will say Orca chose Solana because of its efficiency, because of its scalability, because of its ability to help Orca as an AMM grow. Actually having more efficiency and also Orca's product role pools is meant to bring capital efficiency to its community, to its users. But that accumulated product differentiation means accumulated Orca treasury, and it actually means Orca can decentralize better. So in terms of why we chose Solana, there isn't so much of a conflict there. And Orca as a dApp on a blockchain, our focus is on making sure Orca's community can be fully decentralized and there can be incentive alignment. And it also doesn't make sense for Orca to move to another chain that's arguably more decentralized and having to build our liquidity from the ground up and having to think of different ways to incentivize our community members right now. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really, I mean, I think that's a good response. I think that makes sense in terms of approaching.
But thank you for the question. Obviously, you've been watching the different chains develop.
Yeah, I mean, it is an important question. It's an important consideration, but I think focusing on your aspect of things in terms of decentralizing your community and ensuring that that's being managed appropriately, and there is sort of decentralized flexibility that way. I think that's key. Okay, I think maybe we're running up to an hour now. There's a lot more questions I could ask. There's a lot more questions we could ask, but thank you so much, Kiko, for your time. I really appreciate it. Always good to hear from you. Very insightful stuff here around team building, team incentivization, community engagement, decentralization, as well as like Web3 project planning and scaling. So thank you again for the session today. And hopefully, we'll have you up here again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Ro, for inviting me. And if anyone's interested to learn more about Orca and kind of our points of view and maybe my point of view, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation there.
Yeah, and we've dropped also a link to Orca's website. We can do that again, www.orca.so. Again, orca.so. And on there, you feel free to join their Discord and engage in their community as well.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. TGIF. Have a great weekend.